Hi everyone, it's Kasia from Tarot Map, and this is another installment of Inspired Tarot Map series. And today I'm hosting Melanny Osborn, and she is the face of the Red Orchid Publishing and the author of the Art History Tarot for Past Lives. You can find the review of this deck on my channel, but because it's such an untypical deck, I thought I really wanted to get Melanny for this interview. So welcome, Melanny.
Thank you.
It's lovely to have you. I'm really, as you know, I was really surprised by my impromptu reading online, and that really prompted me to go like, oh my god, maybe this deck is a little bit deeper, and kind of like it just kind of blown me away really, personally. So I'm really happy that you agreed to talk to me about your deck and the work that you do with it. And I think a lot of my audience also will be interested to know more about this deck and, you know, how it came to life, because it's such an untypical deck. Just for the sake of anybody who joins in and has no idea what the deck is, this is a deck, as the name suggests, for past lives. So Melanny has created this particular deck to use for past lives readings, but we will be exploring more about it right now. So Melanny, can you tell me why past lives? Like, what has, like, were you always interested in it? How do you see it? Like, where does the interest come from?
So that is actually a really interesting story. In my early 30s, I started having a mediumship ability that I didn't always have. And I took that brave step in offering readings. And I started to do trade shows. That was a really good platform to find people who maybe needed a reading like that. And on my sign, I listed, you know, what kinds of readings I could do. So I was an avid tarot reader, and I was also a medium, so I could, you know, connect to deceased loved ones, and I could do life questions. And then I just tagged on the bottom of my sign as an afterthought, past life readings, without really thinking that they held as much value as some of the other things that I offered. But what ended up happening was a lot of times people did want past life readings, and I did way more than I would have ever guessed. And I always used tarot to do them. And I found tarot to be really good at reading past lives. Remarkable things would come up. I'm in love with tarot. I'm in love with the diversity. It's a very complex language that's involved with tarot that you don't see with oracle decks. I really liked using it. So it worked. It really worked. And so that's what kind of brought on this interest. The more I worked with clients doing past life readings with tarot, the more I thought, well, it would be really nice if we could read place and time, because tarot was doing everything else. It was telling me about the person's relationships, about their fears, about their phobias, about stuff that was still affecting them in their life now that they'd actually dredged with them from a past life and they weren't aware. So all of the healing that needed to take place through past life exploration was happening. But they always wanted to know, well, who was I? Where was this? You know, where, when? You know, they wanted to know those questions, and tarot doesn't really answer those questions. So I thought, well, maybe there could be a way for it to do that. So that was kind of how the deck came about. And fortunately, I'm not an artist, so I couldn't create my own deck, which I think was actually perfect. Because we have all this diverse art that's in the deck, and there's an extra layer of history within the deck too. There's the place and time that the artist lived and created that art, and that can serve as a clue as well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so I think art was so much better suited for this project than if I had been doing my own drawings. So yeah.
I think I agree, because it could have been too personal maybe if somebody did it, whereas this is much more kind of universal.
Yeah, we have 78 moments in place and time that are kind of frozen into these cards, and there's more of a collaborative energy, and there's more of a globalization energy to this deck than there otherwise would be. So that was really lucky that I had no art talent. So,
For a change, usually is the other way around. Like I really want to be an artist to make my own deck, but in your case, it's the opposite. But like when you think of past lives, like, so were you always believing in past lives, or had you had any experience like?
I did. Yeah, I had a couple key relationships, also in my early 30s. So everything was kind of hitting me at the same time, where I realized that there was some kind of weird connection. Like I just couldn't explain my feelings. I couldn't articulate my feelings, and I couldn't make sense of the way that I was behaving. It really kind of triggered kind of a psychosis in a way. And I couldn't sort through it without this understanding that there was something deeper and something from the past that was kind of plaguing and haunting me. And I did do like a formal past life regression during that period of my life, and got some details from past lives that really helped me to kind of move forward in my life. And I really feel like that's the point. Like these details of who we were kind of interesting and exciting. Most of us who do cards really like to engage our imagination and go to these other places in our minds. And that's great. But I think the real healing part of past life exploration is understanding how it affected you, and how you're still carrying it. And if you can get to that truth that's like deep inside you, then you can really move past whatever's getting in your way. And that's kind of the point of every life, is to move past our blockages, right? So
yeah, and I think it's interesting, even for people who don't believe in past lives, let's say, it's really not like nobody can prove anything, but I think just the theme, to even focus more on the story, or just the theme of the story that affects you still now, can be enough to kind of go for the readings of past lives, even if you don't believe in them at all.
Right. And I think that's why I kind of felt in the beginning that the past life readings didn't really have any value, because as a medium, or as just looking at a current life situation, we can validate things. You know, I can say, your grandpa used to smoke tobacco. He was 6'10", he died in 92. All of those things can be validated, but we can't validate past lives. And I worried, my concern was that I was just selling a narrative to somebody and there was no way to know. But the more that I just took a leap and engaged and tried to do those readings, the amazing things came up. And one thing that I can think of that's happened more than once is when we have an abusive relationship with somebody. A lot of times that's a previous abusive relationship that you've engaged in before. And this life is an attempt to resolve that, to give that person another chance to get it right. And so a lot of times in a current life, if they have failed to treat that other person with respect, or do the healing that was supposed to occur, knowing that you've carried this from the past and that you were trying to give them another chance, but they just didn't make it, that is so incredibly healing. I've seen so many people just break down in tears knowing that. So definitely, like, there's so much that can happen with this kind of exploration that I think in a lot of ways trumps a current life reading and is more valuable than current life readings. So yeah, it's really awesome.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. And so you had this interest in past lives, you just put it on the website, and then you decided, okay, I just need a little bit more of a specific deck, and that's what made you create this one, yes?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I put on my poster that I had at my trade show. So it was one of those things. But a lot of people saw that and were like, yeah, I want to do that. A lot of people. And so I was forced into it a lot by the universe to do these past life readings and to keep looking at that. And to realize that there really was kind of this need. So there's a need here that hasn't been filled. So I felt like, even if nobody bought this deck, which fortunately for me, that hasn't been the case, but even if they didn't, I needed the deck to exist. I needed this deck. So I would have been happy, you know, with whatever the outcome was going to be.
So with this deck, because if you guys haven't seen the deck, as I said, it's on my channel. There's a full flip through, a little review, and also a sample reading. And I was just wondering, you know, that it was kind of like a mind-blowing experience. And as we spoke before, just before I clicked recording, it was interesting that even if not everything from the reading resonates, like and even if you cannot prove anything, there are things that just hit home, and you kind of, even if you don't know, you kind of know that something is true, and something from this reading just like makes you this like, oh my God, like realization of, or confirmation, because sometimes you might even know these things. Like I knew about Australia, but I just like seeing that Australia pop out like the first card, bam, was just like, okay. But then all the other things around it, it was really interesting. So I was just also really surprised when I was doing a review of your deck that you kept the tarot system. And that was my next question, like, why did you keep tarot? Have you always been interested in tarot? You already mentioned this, but was it important for you to keep tarot in this particular deck? Why not just, you know, beautiful images of oracle cards?
I think a lot of us either are in an oracle camp or a tarot camp. I've noticed that, like some people, either they gravitate to the oracle and they really like oracle cards, or they really like tarot. And I am a tarot person, mainly because, I mean, I think that some people's hesitation with tarot is that there's both dark and light cards in the deck, and that's what they don't like. But the reality is we live on a dark plane. The earth plane is a dark plane. And so to be able to navigate that system accurately, this plane that we live on accurately, we need those dark cards. In order to get to your deepest fears or to understand what have caused you pain in a past life, we need dark cards to understand that. And fortunately, through the dark, we can access the light. So I feel like tarot has an energetic complexity that oracle cards typically lack, as far as I'm concerned. That's not to say that all oracle cards lack depth. There are some that are very beautiful and very useful, but I just find that that balance of light and dark cards really allows us to have full communication with Holy Spirit and be able to understand things on a deeper and more applicable level. So
you kept the tarot. And we
yes.
were laughing that if somebody doesn't know the tarot, they might wonder, what is 10 of W?
Yes. So yeah, the 10 of W for Wands, and just a little brief indicator at the bottom right. So really, I feel like that little addition on the cards is for avid tarot readers, because if you don't know tarot already, that's useless. But it is on the card so that you can read the deck as a tarot deck as well. A lot of times, especially if you're going to pull 2 or 3 country cards or 2 or 3 time period cards, we need to default to the tarot system to read the other cards.
Exactly. That was my question at some point, because I was actually trying to use your deck on 2 of my friends. And in one of the readings, sometimes, you know, the cards kind of, like in my reading, they were kind of making a story by themselves. Like I didn't have to try too hard. But in my friend's reading, it was just a lot of, I think she either got a lot of time cards or a lot of places cards. And it was suddenly a bit like, so wait, how do I read it now? So tarot helped a lot. But do you have any other advice of when, for example, we get a lot of places cards or a lot of time cards? Like how can we get around not to get blocked? You know, when you just go, I don't know what to do with Turkey, Mexico, Australia, like what does it mean?
Yeah. So interestingly, I think this kind of connects back to your previous question. Having a tarot system helps to deal with the kind of that double entendre, so to speak, of having more than one country. So the tarot system is the default if we're starting to get a lot of those. But interestingly, in my first version of this deck, there were more country cards. And what happened was I practiced with the deck and I realized there were too many country cards. We were always pulling 2 or 3 countries and it just didn't work. We weren't able to form narratives. So I had to go down to like 8 countries, which it was killing me because the world is so big. And I've thought about creating an expansion where you can just plug certain countries, sections in or something like that so that there's a broader scope for place, but those really just had to be pared down. The continent, there's a card for each continent except Antarctica, which most people don't have past lives in Antarctica. So everything's technically covered. But yeah, those had to be pared down. So back to your second question, which was what do we do when we have several country cards? There is a system in the book that tells you which cards get priority for place and time. Your center card, your core and your crossing core cards, those are your place and time cards. And then there's a system. I think I want to say the past card would be your next tier of trumping place and time. And so you just follow that system. And then whichever ones are outside of that are the ones that you go back to your traditional tarot. Yep, exactly, right there.
Yeah, so you can guys find it, sorry, you can guys find it in the companion book. It's just next to the spread.
Exactly. Yep.
But so if you, for example, like let's say we get place in the core card, so like I got Australia, let's say, and whatever we get in the where we get in this crossing core, if we get, let's say, 4 cards of place miraculously in the other cards, we actually don't treat them anymore as, would you read them as place as well, as additional something, or you just keep the place and then focus on pictures only and on tarot kind of meaning?
I like to leave it versatile, because I have a hard time believing that, you know, every time we put a placement, it's exactly right. I think most of the times that's the case. So if I were to pull, let's say, that 6-card spread, and we only had 1 place card and it was over to the right, which to me, that's the future spot, and that's the least likely to give you any kind of concrete place and time. But if that's where we had it, that's probably what I would read as my place. So I try to keep it a little bit open. And of course, we have to engage intuition to be able to read this stuff accurately and be able to see things. So fortunately, there's a lot of places to look for clues. There's a place and time for each card that's in the book. So if you're pulling just a regular card in those core and crossing core spots, those can be read as place and time. And so I would start there, but you might find that a time card or a place card, especially if you've been pulling that card more than once, is really speaking to you as that place or time. So
yeah, that it's coming for you.
Right, exactly.
Notice me, see me.
Yeah, I call those the talkers, the talking cards.
Yeah, I remember like yeah, when I was doing this review, I was going like, I'm so glad you kept the tarot system, even though I like Oracle and tarot, but like I'm also a more tarot person, and I just found it like gives so much more layers of interpretation, and
exactly.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So like, can you share a little bit like how do you read with your deck? Like, do you start with this particular spread, or do you have any other kind of
So I am a huge 5-card spread person. I just like that simple. I like paring it down to 5 cards. And for the past life, I do add that crossing core card. So if I'm reading a past life spread, I will do that 5-card spread, which I know at some point we're going to talk about the workbook. But a lot of the reasons why there was only 1 spread in that book is that's typically what I use. I typically just have this one system that I stick to. And then if one question kind of or 1 card perplexes me, or I'm feeling stuck, then I just pull additional cards on that card. And that's basically my system. That's kind of, I feel like I need to do more different kinds of spreads and stuff to kind of broaden my horizons a little bit, because I think I do kind of default a little too much to that 6-card, 5-card spread. But
that's interesting that when you have any kind of, because sometimes people feel like, you know, when I already have these 5 cards, like, and I don't understand them, sometimes we're afraid to pull extra cards. So you would advise not to be shy and like just confirm something if you want to understand it better.
Sometimes something will just be hanging out there and I really can't connect it to the rest of the spread. And so I just trust that there's maybe a second message here or a second layer. So I just create a little mini extra spread to the side. Typically I'll pull 2 to 3 cards to help elaborate upon that card. And my system is I always just directly talk to spirit. So I'll say, spirit, show me this. And I just find that helps kind of channel and focus your energy so that you're like engaging kind of with the universe to get those answers.
Yeah, you kind of create like the space for intuition to be respected, kind of. Yeah,
kind of a verbal meditation, so to speak.
Yeah, I remember when I did this sample reading for myself, you know, I used the companion book, like I read this information from there, and then I went into this workbook, and, you know, like I didn't know what the workbook was about, but it's really like such a great compilation with all of this, because then I started like kind of going deeper with the spreads from the workbook, which you included quite a lot of spreads, and also those, you know, I was going through all these tables and looking for maybe some extra like little juice of, you know, a little bit different angle of the interpretation of the card. So I think this workbook is really cool. That must have been a lot of work. Like, I'm serious. Like, I was just going like, oh my God, this is like a lot of work put into this workbook. As much as, you know, looking for the images, I'm sure, and like describing all of it. So I'm really like, and I think, to be honest, like, this is such an affordable bundle. If I was to advise anybody to get, like, the deck is very affordable by itself. I think it's like $25. Am I right? Or is it
31, and then
31? Yeah.
48 for the set, and that
Yeah.
includes shipping and tax and everything. So.
Exactly. I was just going 48 for 2 books and a deck. This is amazing. And especially that this is like such a practical thing that you can use over and over again, not just with this deck. You can use it for any really deck. So I think this is amazing. And this, I was doing this, you know, some relationship spreads from this. So I think this is really interesting also, especially that one that is speaking about a relationship which, you know, didn't quite go very right, but they usually teach you so much, you know, you already like, it's a learning curve.
I feel like we all have that one relationship that kind of haunts us, and we want answers, and we feel that past life connection. So the workbook is really great for that. And the story of the workbook is actually pretty interesting. As I already admitted that I kind of have this one spread that I kind of default to. But I noticed after I released the deck, there were several comments people made that there was only one spread in the book. And I could have thrown those comments out because I think that's really typical for a deck book to have one spread in it. But I recognize that this is a whole new system, and people are feeling like they needed a little more guidance on how to navigate the system and how to ask different types of questions. So I took on the task of creating the workbook, and I definitely had a lot of help from my guides. I did 3 spreads a day in designing them. Many of them I designed before I actually attempted to practice. And then adjusted from there. But a lot of them were just kind of like inspired, and some of it came really easily to me. Yeah, so much so that I feel like with the workbook and the deck, I feel like I can't take full credit for those. I feel like there was a collaboration and there was a lot of voices in there. Thankfully, people that like the deck, that's what gave birth to the workbook. So.
Yeah, I was surprised, you know, when you asked me like if I want the workbook, I'm like, oh, well, I don't know, I usually don't use those, but right. I'm so glad you sent it, because it's a really like, yeah, again, I was just in general kind of much more positively surprised by this deck and by your books than I expected to. I just like, you know, not to like diminish it, but I just felt like, oh yeah, no, you know, past life readings. So sometimes I do those, but so this is my next question with the deck, because can you use this deck for any other readings? Would you use it just based on, you know, because if somebody doesn't know tarot, let's say, and they just have the name of the card, I know that most of the cards kind of, if you know tarot, you can find the image corresponding with the tarot imagery as well in some way or another, but can you use it for any other readings? Do you use it for any other?
I have, yes. I specifically remember one that I did for a client, and we were asking about her current life. I used that deck, and one of the cards that came up was daughter, which was a young girl, and then the other one was violence, which in that deck is the picture of the rape of the Sabines, which is a bit of a myth. But I felt really strongly that there needed to be a card that represented sexual assault, because women have suffered, so many women have experienced that. And the 5 of Swords is rather vague in terms of what kind of abuse is occurring. So I pulled those 2 cards, and I was able to divine that as a young girl she had been assaulted, and that turned out to be true. Wow. So I have found the deck to be to offer different kinds of context clues than a traditional tarot deck. So I would not discourage anyone from using the deck in that way, especially if you're just looking for a second perspective or you're feeling lost with the traditional tarot. I feel like it's a good deck for getting like more concrete, especially with like in terms of relationship, because we have a sister and a brother and a daughter and a son card, and there's not that kind of versatility in the tarot. So, and that can kind of help. I think it can kind of help narrow down your reading a little bit more.
Yeah, I was just thinking like a bit more divinatory kind of, but from the quite psychological, because I mean in tarot you can find mother, brother, but it's not really like so so clear, because all the queens can be mothers, but they also can be part of yourself, and you know, you can go with the so here you have the hello, it says mother. So that's interesting. Okay, so that's good. And just to ask about the tarot in general in your life, when did you start with tarot? Was
in
it
my
like...
early 30s.
So this was the 30s, yeah? The 30s started everything.
I'm 40 now, so it's been probably a span of about 10 years. And
how come?
My stepmother did have a deck as a young girl, so I think I have to take a step back and say that, you know, there was a period in my adolescence where I was exposed to tarot and had used it. She had a strange relationship with that deck. At one point she threw them away, so there was kind of like a fear or something going on there. So that wasn't a totally positive experience for me. And even when I started back, I wasn't sure it was a positive thing. But the more that I worked with it and the more I just focused on casting protection, I think is really important. And being able to kind of bring your energy down to a calm place for reading, so that you can actually look at the dark and light without allowing your fears or your struggles to kind of provoke you into some kind of panic. So I worked with it some more, and eventually got to a point where I recognized that there was really deep inherent value, spiritual value, in using the deck for my own life. I can't really even imagine my life without tarot now. Like it's a part of me. It's a part of not only my business, but even if I wasn't doing it as a business, I would need it for me personally. So it just helps. It's such a great tool for personal reflection and being able to look at energies that you wouldn't otherwise be able to look at.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm totally with you on this one. And what's your favorite system then? Rider-Waite-Smith or Toff or Marseille?
I actually feel very strongly about the Rider-Waite system. I'm much more a Rider-Waite person. I'm actually a little uncomfortable with the Thoth deck. I don't own one, and I'm not a real Aleister Crowley fan.
Yeah.
So I'm much more Rider-Waite-Smith, and I think that's kind of apparent in my deck too. That's kind of the system. So
yeah, a lot of decks are based on Rider-Waite-Smith. That's true. And
right.
what's your favorite deck right now then? Do you have a lot of decks, or do you just keep Rider-Waite-Smith and your deck?
For years and years and years, I had an Anna Kay deck. And even when I go to a show, I still will use an Anna Kay deck. And the reason why is because it's very accessible for someone who doesn't know tarot. So they can look at those images and really get where I'm coming from on what that card means. So I'm a huge fan of that deck. In my own private practice, finally in the past year, I finally gravitated away from Anna Kay. And I've been using, there's a mosaic tarot that's on Etsy. A friend created it, and it's actually like a little poker-sized card. So I wasn't sure if I would like that at first, but I've actually come to really love that deck, and that's what I've been using recently. And I also have been using the Wild Unknown tarot. Also, that one is that one's very interesting. We could go on for 10 minutes about that, but I feel like her art was very authentic in that deck and very solid, just a real solid deck with very consistent art throughout. So, and you know, and I have some hesitations too, but like I said, we could go on for 10 minutes about that deck, but yeah, that's the one I'm using.
Yeah, The Wild Unknown, I think it's a favorite of many of us, because as you said, I actually love what you said, that it's like the art does seem honest, and it's very kind of like it, you feel it, it's beautiful. And it was so unusual when it came out. It was like there was nothing like this. When I remember myself seeing first this deck, I was just like, oh my god, this is amazing. Like, what is it? Give me that tarot.
Yes. Yes.
And do you mix oracle decks with tarot, or you just pure?
I have never done that, but the more that I've been promoting this deck, the more I've watched other people do it, and I've been inspired to try that. I really like Kelly Fitzgerald's Lenormand deck, but unfortunately it's not for sale anymore. But that one just had a lot of just basic color, and I feel like that could really add to any deck. So yeah, I'm interested to play, but yeah, I'm not in the habit of doing that.
Yeah, I can get it. So my last question, and maybe we will keep it shorter, because I think people are scared of long interviews. So last question, right?
That's right. I think we're good.
So usually when I finish the interview, I ask people to share like a favorite way to play with the cards. You already mentioned your 5-card you're a 5-card girl. I'm actually also always either 3 or 5. But do you have any other way or anything you can share with us that we can maybe try at home, a spread or an idea or something?
One that I thought of when you asked this question is, let's say you have a question that's really kind of a yes/no, right? Tarot is kind of hard in terms of a yes/no. It's more deals with specific energies. So what I will do is I will go through the tarot and I will hand select 3 to 5 cards that will mean yes, or 3 to 5 cards that will mean no. And then I will shuffle those really, really good, and I'll lay them all out, and I'll pull 3 of the 6 and look at the dynamic. And that has worked really well for me on getting yes or no's out of the deck.
Oh, I like it. So wait, let me kind of, so you pull from an open deck.
Right.
You look like, okay, this is a no.
Right.
This is a yes, right? This is, this is a yes, and whatever. Yes, right. So that's what you do. So you pull 3 cards that represent yes, and 3 cards that represent no. And then you mix just the 6 cards, not mix them back into the deck, just the 6.
Correct. Yeah.
And
so that
from this 6, you pull 3.
I've narrowed down the energy for myself so that I can pick a yes or a no card. And I've found it to be, I'll amaze myself with how often I'll just pull that same one.
I'm so trying this. Yeah. This is awesome. Because usually when you just pull one, you're like, you're not sure. You're kind of like, then you have to pull another one. But with the 3, you can get 2 yeses and a no. But it's still good, but 2 no's.
I'll just shuffle them again, and I'll repeat it 3 or 4 times, so that I get really positive that I'm getting yes, or positive that I'm getting a no. But I've been able to get much clearer answers that way without trying to navigate the entire tarot deck. So
yeah, oh, that's good. I like it. I hope you guys like it too. I will try it on Instagram. I'm like, this is Melanny's approach here. There you go. This is cool. But it's great. And also, so thank you so much for sharing. And I think as a finishing thought, I also wanted to say that, to build up a relationship with any deck, it just takes time also. So I think right now we're kind of very impatient because we get a lot of new decks and a lot of everything is new, and we have this kind of sense of like, oh, it should be already working, even if somebody's studying tarot, and they kind of think they can't read, because it's like making a friend, or it takes time. So just for people to be patient, practice, not be scared, exercise on themselves, like test, yes, no, maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't. All it's fine, all our answers are allowed. But try, and don't be scared not to play with the cards, because that's what they are here for. And maybe life should be more playful than all serious all the time.
Agreed.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us, and for bringing to life this beautiful deck and the books. It was lovely to host you. Don't go yet. I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody, and you can say goodbye.
Yes, and thank you for making time to interview me, because I really appreciate that also. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Melanny. So bye everyone. Thank you for watching, and we will speak to you soon in the next episode. Bye.